Okay, we're back on. And you were telling me about some of the other guest appearances you were making. Were you getting a lot of attention for some of these appearances you were making?
Yes, because at, at that point in time, these shows were really highly rated. Everybody watched them. Uh, it was what you wanted to do. You wanted to get a guest shot on these shows and work yourself up into a television movie, you know. Yes, absolutely. In fact, they led into my being considered for Margaret Houlihan on MASH because it was a CBS show and Fox as well. I had done a guest starring role in Glenn Ford's series Cades County, which was short-lived, but it was a wonderful role. It was the debut episode with Darren McGavin, and so those kind of things got a lot of attention, and the network people as well as Fox and knew about me, and therefore when the part came up, they thought of me. They thought I was physically the right type, and they knew my work. They felt I could handle it and so forth. And so I know I had that boost going in for the role.
And did they send you a script for that?
There was no script actually ready, not anything to, no, nothing to read. As a matter of fact, Gene Reynolds wanted to see film, and I said, I don't really have anything to submit. Everything. It was also, you know, histrionic. I was jumping off cliffs. I was shooting people. I was getting shot. It was all, and I hadn't done any comedy on film. I had done comedy on stage, and I talked this out with Millie Gussie, who was the casting director at Paramount, the one who called me in about the Mannix and the one who told me about Millie Stone. And she said, don't do it. We have very little imagination. She said, don't do it. Lose the job on your own merits. Don't lose it because they look at a piece of dramatic film and say, well, but she's a dramatic actress and she can't do comedy. And so I submitted that as a theory to my agent, and they said, well, I said, there's something sensible about that. And then before we could act on that theory, we had an offer for a movie from Universal with Olivia de Havilland, which thrilled me beyond belief because she's someone I have admired for years, and she's a wonderful actress, and it sounded like a good film. But the dates of shooting that film and the pilot for MASH conflicted, and I just, as a courtesy call, since the MASH people had dibs on me for those dates until they made a decision one way or the other, my agent called them and said, we've just had an offer and there are conflicts in the dates and we thought we should let you know. And Gene said, no, we were really just going to call you about Loretta. We've decided we'd like to go with her, and we're going to prepare the contracts and so forth. So it kind of forced their hand, or maybe they were ready, I don't know, but that's how that whole thing came about.
Did they have you read with Alan Alda?
No, there was nothing to read. There was nothing to read. I don't think anyone read for the roles. I think they were just cast. I know McLean didn't. He had done a lot of work at CBS, a lot of pilots that didn't get on. And in fact, he told me, he said, I'm sure we'll get on the air. He said, they convinced me when I agreed to do this pilot that it would. He said, I said to them, fellas, I'm running out of gas. I've done blah, blah, many pilots. And they said, no, this is going to be the one. And it was. McLean was just superb as the commander those first 3 years. Funny. You would come home exhausted just from laughing at McLean. But there was really no script ready to.
When did you first meet Larry Gelbart?
When? Gee, I don't know. I guess 71, because I think the series began in 72 and ended in 83. So it must have been the year before. we did the pilot, and then there was the wait, and then we got the go-ahead.
What do you remember about the shooting of the pilot?
I remember it was very cold. We shot some of it at the Fox Ranch in Malibu Canyon, and the poor guys had to wear those Hawaiian shirts. And we just were freezing. Wayne was blue. Everybody's nose was running. Everybody was sniffling, and we were huddled. I had the theory that we got close because we had to be. We were so close all the time, huddling and keeping each other warm. I remember that, and I remember that we had an awful lot of fun. I remember the day we walked in to rehearse, to read it and meet everybody, as though it were just yesterday. It was so memorable. They were all so special and just wonderful, just bright and wonderful. And there was an air of excitement in the room and electric. And I guess we all really just liked each other instantly. Everybody seemed to be on the same wavelength in terms of the work and what we thought of what we wanted to do. That I think everyone had a lot of integrity, especially I think the producers, the production values never let up. They were always of such a high quality and made you so proud that they were back there taking care of how you looked out there.
So is this unusual for a comedy show to be?
It was my first. It was my first one, so I don't know. I would think that it has to be. I know it was unusual to fight to have a rehearsal day, and that rehearsal day certainly contributed a great deal towards making the show as fine as I think it became. Television is fast, it's tough, you know, and that one rehearsal day, I think, allowed us to be better and allowed us to be as good as we could be. It was a bonus as far as we were concerned.
After the filming of the pilot, did you have a good feeling about it?
Yes, I think I did. I didn't love what I had to do in it. I don't think it showed enough of her character, but it's 22 minutes and everybody's got to get in there and do his bit. And but I thought it was good. I thought it was cute. I thought everybody was working with all cylinders, and it was certainly our best effort at that point in time. And I don't know, someone said to me, don't think about it, just do it like another job so that you don't obsess about, is it going to get on, will it get on, God, this would be wonderful, it would be, so that you don't obsess, just treat it like a wonderful job. And I remember when we wrapped, we were just feeling very postpartum depression things, and we all went out to Mateo's and just had, it was so obvious that we wanted to stay together. You know, this is not over. It wasn't a wrap party. It was a bunch of people who enjoyed being together, who wanted to be together, who wanted to prolong the time together and not say goodbye. And then we started calling each other long before we knew it was in or out, or because we had developed ties and friendships already.
Had you seen the feature film?
No. I was in Hawaii doing a 2-part Hawaii Five-0 and having a wonderful time. It was just glorious. I was there for the holidays, and they have a firework display, and I'm crazy for fireworks. They have something like you don't see anywhere else. The whole mountain lights up with these fireworks, and so I was having a wonderful time. And when I got back, I think about a day later, Fred called and said, "Have you seen the film MASH?" And I said, "No." He said, "Wonderful." He said, "That's great. Swit, that's great." he said, you have to go and meet with Gene Reynolds and Larry Gelbart tomorrow afternoon. He gave me some time. Went shopping beforehand with my dear friend Madeline Rue. We went to Saks. We both bought silly hats. And then I went to the interview. And I thought just going out and having fun and not thinking about what anything could mean would take the onus off of attaching too much importance to it. You know, it would just, again, be free, relaxing, just meet these people and, you know, put your best face forward. They know you want to work. They know you don't have to tell them that you want the job. And it just was meant to be. It worked out.
Let's talk about the character that you played. What is her name, and then can you describe it for me?
Major Margaret Houlihan. She was the head nurse, and her ambition was to be the best damn nurse in Korea. I tried to help her achieve that, and the writing was spectacular. They helped me to come close. I think she was the best damn nurse. They would write wonderful, wonderful material for her. Have her father, many-starred general, come and visit me, cast it with a fabulous actor, Andy Duggan, and we would get to know her character through episodes like this, where she was an only child, she was a girl. A general doesn't want a girl, a general wants a guy to follow in his footsteps, and so she was trying to be the soldier he didn't have, you know. And we see all this, and the writers were just wonderful, just like working on a little miracle all the time. You'd come in and read these scripts and either jackknife with laughter or be moved to tears. They were just on top of it all the time, trying different combinations of all these people. What would happen if Houlihan got stuck with Klinger? You know, famous enemies. And what would happen if he was driving her to the airport and he had a flat and they were stuck overnight? What would happen, you know? And they would just go from there. This imagination and this talent would take over, and Jamie and I would be working on this delicious material. It was really, for an actor, what a way to go.
Can you talk about Houlihan's relationship with Frank Burns and then later on the Donald character?
I wish he had had more of a relationship with the Donald character, who was only brought in twice, and they were two different actors. The first actor, Beeson Carroll, whom I really married in the show, was not available when he had to come back as Donald, and so my friend Mike Henry came in and did Donald. And I guess there were, it must have been a year at least apart, but anyway, Gene Reynolds kept saying, Loretta, it's episodic, they won't notice. But anyway, I was delighted to have my friend Mike come in and to fill Donald's footsteps. So, but it was so temporary, and then, as you know, what happened. Donald cheated on me. I got the wrong letter in the mail. He was writing to Darlene. To go back to your question about Larry, Larry, golly, he was such a talent, and he had this remarkable talent of memorizing pages of dialogue with, you know, he wouldn't leave out a comma. And once Larry Gelbart found out about this talent, he would write him pages of dialogue. And we would usually, Larry and I, do the last scenes. You would see the call sheet would say Hot Lips Tent, and it was always Larry and I. And so we'd have all day to kind of fool around and rehearse what we were going to do. And was very exciting and very crazy because he was that kind of an actor. You could try anything with him. Well, why don't we try this? And then would go to the director and say, do you like this? And would kind of do this, and he'd say, yes, I love it, or whatever. Larry, if he missed a comma or a word, had this dance that he would do. He would grab my shoulders and he would jump up and down with his eyes closed, trying to jog his memory into saying the comma or the period that he left out. And it would just be too funny. But just grab my shoulders as though I was some sort of conduit getting this inspiration to remember the word or whatever. And just jump up and down in pain with his eyes scrunched closed. It was quite delightful. It was quite something working with Linville. And I thought we had some extraordinary times together with those two characters.
Now, did you have to learn nursing techniques?
Well, yes, that's part of your research. You should know what you're doing. If he asks for a scalpel, you should know where it is, and you should know how to put it in his hand. You should know how to put on those terrible rubber gloves. It's an art, but you really need to know how to do that. You should know how to cleanse and how to help the doctor do that. Yes. Because this is what you're doing, this is what you've been trained for, and therefore it's a part of your acting chore, your task, to do it. And and you build up this amazing respect for the real people whom you're portraying, because what they do for little, if any, wages is pretty terrific. And I think that probably led me into, really loving this character, what she stood for and what she did, and all those nurses in that period. These women volunteered to be where they were. None of them were drafted. Women had a very small role in the military at that point in time and during that war. And what they did was phenomenal. They were phenomenal heroes, these women. Korea, you find out in your research, is the coldest place on Earth, the entire globe, during the winter. More soldiers died from frostbite than they did from the war. And in the summer, it is the hottest spot on Earth, and a lot of soldiers died from snake bite. So you had not only the war to contend with, you had these conditions. And they would write things for Houlihan that told us about these women. She runs into Harry Morgan standing in the shower, and he has given an order to evacuate the nurses. And she's outraged. This is what she's there for. She doesn't want to be moved. And her girls. And she goes in to see him, and she begins with, "Colonel, I have to see you." And he says, "One more step and you will." Anyway, I had this extraordinary speech that they wrote about her passion. And she's explaining to him, "This is what I do. This is who I am. You can't send me away now. Now's when you need me, and now's when I need to be here to show you what I can do. And my girls are with me. They're not going anywhere. We need to stay here." And I remember it was, "Colonel, you must let me serve." She was just a beautiful, beautiful character. And funny, she said, "You have to understand something about me. I was born to do this. When I was growing up, I thought a civilian was just some officer waiting for his uniform to come back from the cleaners." So she's saying, all I knew was this, and you're sending me away from it? So, but the writing was just spectacular.
There's a well-known episode called The Nurses.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to ask you about.
Boy. Kate, wonderful Joan Darling directed that episode, and I remember the day we were rehearsing, she saw that the years of doing this character had me ready to do this scene where I explode at them. It was like a tapped explosion. There was a lid on it and contained, but she's telling them how they have made her feel. And it was very, very revealing for this character to admit that they hurt her feelings. It's what she's saying, really. And Jones saw this thing that's been bubbling in her character. Now it's about to explode. And I remember she took my hands like that and she said, leave it. Bring it back tomorrow. Don't even rehearse it anymore. Go home. And she was right. It was there. It was simply there. You don't fix anything unless it's broken. Just go home, bring it back tomorrow, and do it. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful episode that in subsequent interviews, most of them wanted to focus on that and the character from then on and her relationship to the nurses. She was one of the first characters. I don't even know if there were others, but I was allowed to continue to grow. I didn't bounce back to where I was before you saw this happen to her. And as a result, she became a full-blown, interesting character because these things had an effect on her. And we could see that in subsequent episodes. We got to know her better, and she couldn't go back to being what she was in episode 1 or year 1.
Did the actors get to watch the dailies?
Sure, anytime you wanted. I did, religiously. It's like going to school. You see what works, what doesn't work, and sometimes crawl on your hands and knees begging for a retake because I can do it better. I know I can do it better, or whatever.
What was your reaction to the dailies of the nurses?
I didn't see them. I didn't see them. I had the day off the next day, and they all called me after the dailies, Jean and Bert and the writers, and they called me and they said, we ran it twice. It is so powerful. You know, they really made my day. I mean, they said everything that I felt was there and how it made me feel. And when we did the documentary, they had me talk about it. And when I did, and I was quoting her emotions were still inside me about this shutout. It was such a graphic display of how lonely it is at the top, this cornball phrase. It is. She was. There was another episode where they brought in Marcia Rod as a former classmate of mine when we were studying to be nurses, and she's with a different MASH unit, and she comes to visit Margie or Maggie or, you know, somebody we don't even know because that little girl doesn't exist anymore. And Marcia's character is so taken aback by the change in Margaret's personality, and Margaret is able to explain, I woke up in Korea and I was in charge of 25 nurses and I couldn't be their friends. I couldn't be their friend. I have to tell them what to do. I'm responsible for their lives. And so I thought I had to be tough and I couldn't joke around and everything. So Marcia's character is saying, you were so much fun. So out of this episode, Margaret goes inside of herself and looks at herself, and she tries subsequently to joke around a little bit. So they started writing about that, how she was trying to be one of the guys, she was trying to get in there, and I remember I had a scene shortly afterwards with Hawkeye, with Alan, and I say something that I'm hoping is pretty clever and funny, and he looks at me and he says, Margaret, you made a joke. He says, not a funny one, but it was an attempt to make a joke. He's looking at me, and I'm killing myself because I think it's quite funny, and he says, yeah, well, it wasn't a bad joke. And now we're really starting to laugh, but it just, again, gave the character an opportunity to show us another branch on her little tree, on her little shrub or whatever. And it was, for an actor, great fun to be able to keep on going and exploring and digging and finding these new things, because that's people. That's why those characters remain so loved and remain so real to the audience, because they were so real. They had such dimension. And I know there were contests for kids to write about what they think happened after the close of the show, because for them, those characters continued on. That have me marry Hawkeye, or, look up Frank, or Frank gets a divorce, whatever. In their minds and in their hearts, those people continued to live. They went on and on. It was a real tribute, really, for them to feel so strongly.
Well, let's talk about some more of the ensemble. First of all, I'd like to ask you about working with Alan Alda. What would you like to work with?
Those questions, we get them all the time. This is 11 years of our lives, and you want me to say what it was like to work with a person who's one of my friends. It was wonderful. We all worked so well together. We all liked being there. We liked being with each other. And it was something you didn't have to work on, because it just poured over into whatever the script was demanding. It was there. And weekends weren't too much different. We saw each other on weekends, and there was one awards show, an Emmy award show, where we actually hired a bus and turned down those big limousines so that we could go together and be together, So, and I think that's probably the best example I can give you about how bonded we all felt and how close we all felt. It was such a teamwork operation. We trusted each other. I remember not only Alan, myself, any number of us would be watching each other perform. And every once in a while, let's say, if I have a doubt in my mind about the director liked it, cut, print, I might look over at a fellow actor and say, was that okay? Or, and what? Or conversely, and then you go to them, what can I fix? You can do it better, whatever. And then would go to the director and get another take, if he would allow it. But that's kind of why you go to dailies. You want to keep getting better. That's the fun of it, and our profession allows you to do that. We can keep growing, hopefully.
Okay, we're at the end of our next tape.